For me, when I first moved to Vancouver in 1956, it was hard because there's a lot of racism. You couldn't find an apartment because you were native. It was hard to get into an apartment, so I ended up in an outer court. Lived in the outer court, as well as sometimes I stayed at the YMCA. In those days, that was $2 a night, whenever I came down, and 35 cents for bacon and eggs and coffee. Now you can't even get that today. From the time I moved to Vancouver, I was doing that because I did not graduate from high school, but I managed to get by what I had, the knowledge that my grandmother, my grandfather, and my dad taught me, to retain everything that I saw as a youngster, to spread it amongst a younger generation, to try and help to understand our cultures, our ways, our language, and our dances. So that's been my kind of a thing in the past. And then I was in my reserve. They were removed from our original village where we lived, Blunden Harbour, called Bass, and where my mother came from the coast, called Kwakitolah. And they moved our people, those two tribes, from their villages to Port Hardy. And then they had to deal with the Quaker people for Band to lease their land where they settled in for $1 a year. But eventually the Quaker people wanted our people to buy that land. Of course, they had to reach out to the federal government for some monetary help. And today, I'm thinking about my cousin telling me after they had moved our people out of our villages. My grandfather was the last person to live in our village in Blunden Harbour. He bought the other chief's house and lived in there by himself. He told everybody he was going to die there. He was going to live off the land, which is a lot of food that we can acquire from the sea: clams, cockles, crabs, and fish, everything that you can get. And when I heard my cousin told me the story, he said, "Henry, I just cried and cried when the engineers and the Mountie came and literally removed your grandfather from that house in Blunden Harbour." Soon after they removed him from that village, the Indian agent came and burned all our houses down. We had 2 big houses. Kwakitolah Nation called them Gucci, and the Coast Salish people called the Longhorse Gildichi. We had 2 in our village. One belonged to the other chief, and another one belonged to my grandfather. And the government, you know how folk tongue they can have sometimes, promised that they would build us two big houses in Port Hardy. It never materialized. And now they have been up there doing a blessing of the grounds that they had picked to build this new big house. Just one. And it just costs just keep escalating because they keep putting in a loft. And they had 2 different contractors that come in with different ideas. And when I went up to the meeting to discuss this matter with my people, because I initiated that project, I went to the council, chief councilors, to say that we needed to build a big house there for ourselves so that we can teach our young people the language and the traditional dances. So, okay, they're going to do that. In the meantime, they're trying to negotiate for a treaty. There's two tribes, and I always maintain that it would never work. Because you know how it is, two tribes, one is pitted against each other. So nothing was ever resolved. I got involved with the treaty process for 3 or 4 years. And I decided it's not going to, they've been at it for 32 years now, trying to get the treaty done. Meantime, they asked me to go to the Royal BC Museum to look at the artifacts that belong to our people up there in that village. So I met the people in our village there and asked if they were willing to go down to Victoria to look at these artifacts. And that was the last thing that I was doing. I'm working with a researcher right now to try and repatriate all the artifacts that we had in there. I've done some work in the American Museum of Natural History, working on the person that's in charge, Peter Whiteley. They had taken me up to upstairs in the storage area in American National Museum History to show me all these artifacts. And they wanted me to do demos of how they are performed. So I did that. So after that, I had a meeting with the head of the head honcho there, and I asked him, I said, it's time that you start returning some of these artifacts to where they belong. And there was a young man that came a few years later after that from Balakola, well versed in the artifacts in Balakola, the North people. And he had a really good system. He had a very good researcher. Just a young man, and he had approaches elders and chiefs to relearn the history of their artifacts that belong in their territory, which is good. So they were the ones that got them right back, most of what they had there. But our people are so slow, they just didn't want to waste time. Blah, 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 blah. So I just gave up. I didn't do any more of that for them in New York. There's 2 museums in New York. And I went to Washington, D.C., the new museum. And they were trying to hire me to work with their artifacts. But I didn't see any sense living all the way in Washington, D.C. But they still want me. Remember I told you, I never graduated from high school, but because of knowledge I had about our culture, all the artifacts that we have from the Kwakitolah Nation. And that was the end of the line for me. I figured it's time. I was trying to retire, but I still getting calls to do things. I did 3 dances last year, 2 in Vancouver, 1 out in White Rock, because people still want me to do performances. So that's my whole lifeline. Oh, Seaweed, Kwakitolah. My everyday name was Tsm'syen. In the old days, it was the duty of the grandmother to give the grandchild an everyday name. That's different from Potlat's name. So she named me Tsm'syen, which means he's the one. Pretty much have fulfilled all that from what was expected of me from my grandmother, my grandfather, and my father. I've pretty much done all that fits my name today. My Potlat's name, my everyday name. Because a lot of the things that we used to do are gone. Young people don't want to pay attention. Take what he explained to them, what used to happen. in my time, what we could do to revive that. The powers to be in chartered the opening of the new big house, supposed to open next year in August, to start acquiring feast bowls so we could show the young people what we used to have, how we used to fill those feast bowls with our food, seal meat, deer meat, fish heads and all that good stuff. So, thank you very much for listening. Thank you for listening.
It's a great honor. Thanks again, All right, great.